Welcome, everyone. Hope you're having a great Empower 2024. You are at the session Unlocking Connectivity by Breaking Down the Walls of Inefficiency. And in this session, we are going to discuss the complexity of construction projects, the challenges that arise from the massive amounts of data, what to look for, where to start, and some practical applications. Just to let you know, we will have a live Q&A after the session is over, so feel free to drop those questions that you've got into the chat. My name is Megan Milam. I am a Senior Solutions Marketing Manager here at Quickbase, and I've got my awesome panelists with me, Bob and Jeff. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Bob?
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Really excited to be here. Excited to talk through this today. Jeff, pumped that you're here. I think every time we get together, there's a lot of insight, a lot of exciting things that we get to get into. And I know it's a topic near and dear to both of our hearts, is about the data connectivity and really the lack thereof, and how do we begin to bridge the gap from department to department, from silo to silo. So thank you, everyone. I do echo, let's use the chat. Let's ask some good questions so that at the end, we have some really good conversation. Introduce myself. I am Bob Salaj. I am the Director of Customer Advisory Team here at Quickbase, specifically within construction. And really, my journey started 20 some years ago, I guess, within manufacturing, actually, with Lean Six Sigma and process improvement. And it was really teaching us and brainwashing us at the point of how to actually solve a problem with using current state and future state and process mapping it. So I was the guy with sticky notes, putting it up on the board and being teased about all the wall art that I was decorating around the office. But really, that kind of led to the last 7 to 8 years within construction. And I was called upon to kind of enter this industry with a local electrical contractor to implement a lean operating model, and quickly found that the data sources of where all this information is coming from was lacking. And we need to kind of find a better way and really kind of implement Quickbase and dynamic work management in terms of figuring out what is all this problem? How do we get all this information together? So really looking at the entire value stream from the beginning of business development to job closeout. I was the one responsible for process mapping, figuring out the new way and evolution to bring this all together, and is extremely thrilled and excited to talk to you about that today. So, Jeff, I guess with that, I'll let you introduce yourself and pass the mic.
Well, I am excited to sit down with you guys today. This is always an opportunity to talk about construction and my passion for it. But actually, I'm an IT architect by trade, so I am the host of the ConTech Crew podcast. Check it out. We're the leading technology podcast in construction. But I spent 25 years as an IT architect learning how to build the system. So if something went or my favorite friends out there who love it when Excel doesn't fire up for some reason and they need a little help, well, that was me. Then spent a little bit of time developing software and learning how it was developed, because a good friend said a best way to learn is to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. So I spent a little time doing that. And about 10 years ago, found myself with an opportunity to run IT for a large masonry subcontractor here in Vail, Colorado, Gallegos Masonry. I did about 3 years with them and realized that the technology and the people building our world around us was such an opportunity for the future that I dug in, joined the team at JB Knowledge, which is where the ConTech Crew was founded, and spent a couple years as a consultant. Last few years, I've actually worked with different startups and different technology providers in the construction space to deal with this big problem as something they call an evangelist, which really is just somebody who's passionate about the problems, the processes, and then the opportunities with technology to solve them. So I'm just excited to sit down and talk shop and learn more. And I'll echo Bob, ask those good questions. That's really where this is headed.
Awesome. Great. So excited to have you both here. So as I mentioned, we're really going to be focusing on digging into the connectivity, the disparate data and information that's associated in construction and building. And I think it would be an understatement to say that building is complex. But we really want to know is, Bob, there's so much information. Can you provide a little bit of insight as to where all of this information in construction is coming from? How it's traditionally used, how it's been stored?
Oh, geez. Sure. One massive spreadsheet and one person in the back room is going to manage it all. Now, data is coming from everywhere. And like you mentioned, Megan, the projects are not getting any less complicated. So we're actually seeing a lot more tools, a lot more software being brought to the work stream. And it's about capturing all that information. So I think I mentioned before, so when we think about construction and project management, our minds might immediately go to folder structures and maybe something that's on SharePoint or your intranet site, where you have to chase down and figure out when was that project and in what year did I create it, because that's how we decided someone 5 years ago was going to track how all these projects are going to be stored. So quite often you're dealing with spreadsheets, Word, PDFs, fillable PDF forms that I've spent a lot of time converting and moving over. But really, I encourage all of us to think through the value stream from beginning to end, right? All of this information starts with business development and CRMs, if you're lucky enough to have one. And as the estimating team and everybody gets involved, we're looking through all of the project documents. And that's scoping requirements. This is all the information that the next department in line who's going to manage all that information might be inputting into systems like Bluebeam or Revit, or Procore, and moving all of this information around with all these different point systems. Ultimately, someone is actually probably putting it on a spreadsheet and saving it back to the project folder again for it. So this is your traditional problem, right? We're dealing with supporting the foreman, the superintendents on the job sites, the project manager, and we're still relying on emails. We're relying on writing down on a piece of paper on a Word document and walking it over to somebody's office to say, okay, you're next in the chain of command here. Go do what you need to do for it. And we're looking at that. So the data is coming from everywhere. As I mentioned, there's a new software for 3D modeling that comes out, I think, every other week. And we need to capture them. We're talking large data sets too. We're talking about how do you capture the bill of materials that might be funneling into supply chain, and seeing all that information. So we're talking your emails, phone conversations, picking it up, walking down to somebody's office, and managing all of this data repository from beginning to end.
Yeah, you said a couple of names there. You mentioned Bluebeam, you mentioned Revit, SharePoint, emails, just having those conversations. There's a lot of systems there, a lot of places that the data could come in. That makes me think about this survey that Quickbase conducted recently, where we asked people to talk a little bit about what systems they require to get their jobs done. And nearly 80 systems, different platforms are being leveraged. We also know that, despite those kind of 80 platforms potentially being used, that construction kind of has this reputation for being a bit behind technology adoption. So Jeff, I kind of wanted to see what your thoughts are on why we're seeing such a high number of platforms despite this reputation of being a little behind the curve. Why are people seeking, so many digital solutions in construction?
Well, there's a couple of different reasons, but I first have to thank both of you for all the flashbacks I get to have because, I came from a contractor that used that folder structure and, 16 folders deep. And we were even saving emails there as exports, and nobody ever slides a folder where they're not supposed to have it so that when you go back to close out, you can find it, or, just slides the whole job into the wrong, SharePoint folder. That never happens, right?
Or delete. Yeah.
Yeah, or delete, even worse. Yeah, that was my favorite, going back to, and it'll age me, but going back to tape and figuring out how to recover it. But then also, recently, Megan, and what you're talking about is I'm at so many different shows, and especially when we're talking about operational excellence or we're talking about any of these, sort of technology focused, they all throw up their slide. I was at a event recently with Hensel Phelps at a BIM and VDC for DBIA, and they threw up theirs. And there's just so many solutions on the board, and it's everybody. But there's a reason for those, right? Each one of those solutions represents a problem in the industry. And, we get a bad rap for sort of where we are from a technology or innovation standpoint. I think that's definitional, right? Look at the world around you. Look at the stadiums. Look at the laboratories. Look at the healthcare systems. Look at the different buildings that we build. They're far more advanced, and we're pumping them out a lot faster than we ever have before. Our schedules are tighter. Our needs are greater. So we're innovative, but we're problem solvers as well. So each time we have a problem, there's a founder somewhere who maybe came from the industry or was sitting and talking to someone from the industry and said, ooh, there's a problem I can solve. The problem with that is I just mentioned, we might be going vertical in construction. We might be going horizontal in construction. We might be doing, grade work. We might be doing concrete. We might be doing mechanical. These are all different. So the solutions are going to look a little different. So, each one of them represents a really good attempt to solve a problem. But ultimately what we've done is we've created an ecosystem that's just untenable anymore. Right. And each of those people has a perspective. I just talked about some, but owners, architects, owners, reps, general contractors, construction managers, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, drywall, framing. These are all people and businesses that have their own perspectives, have their own problem sets, have their own data needs. Each of those people needs to pay their employees, needs to track their progress on jobs. So there's just so much that, again, I think it's a unique opportunity too for us to deal with that problem. So that's a little bit about where I see it from. So I think, but also communication has changed. Think about things like Slack and Teams and just the way we interact. Like we've gone beyond email and beyond spreadsheets, but we got to take everybody with us, and because they've got to have that. I mean, that has to be there.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, Megan, just to chime in, I mean, we talked about my career and going back. I mean, leaving manufacturing, coming into construction, the room for opportunity is immense, and definitely have basically fallen in love with the industry because there is so much possibility that we can begin to see these tools. And like you said, they serve a purpose. They're very good at what they do overall, but how do you get that data out of it so that everybody can see it at the right time and in the right place overall? And I think that's really what's beginning to stem some of this issue. We're seeing all this technology converge, but how do we get our hands on it? How do we get our fingers on it? How do we not repeat and actually have to type in something twice and move it to the next line in a chain of command? And I think that's an interesting spot where we want to make sure and be careful that the cost savings that we're bringing to the industry is not just the rework of what we have to do with these tools. And they're doing something amazing. Let's not lose that momentum in that progress that we're seeing in the industry.
It's interesting, Bob. You said something there about, repeating work or typing something in twice. That's the sort of work that at Quickbase we call that gray work. It's really like the time that you spend chasing information or kind of doing the things that really slow you down from like what's in your job description and what's keeping you from just building the dang thing. So Bob, I wanted to hear a little bit about like your experience in your history of work. What sort of gray work have you experienced like personally and kind of what that was like for you?
Oh yeah. Gray work is everywhere. I will say that. And I think from a lean standpoint, I think it was always interesting because we'd always put up the sticky notes on the whiteboards and begin to map out a process. And when you talk to somebody about, okay, we're going to talk about your current state and what is step one, step two, step three, and we begin to challenge and say, okay, is that really what you do? And as you get that person to begin talking, you realize, well, no, I walk 3 stories to the next office and I have to go hand deliver somebody. That's a step in the process that you can't ignore and figure it out. And so some of the examples, I mean, within construction, I mean, this starts as easy around like job number creation or purchase order. Like when we start a new job, there's a job number that has to get created. And instantaneously, if you don't capture all that right information on the forefront of it, it's going to get implemented in terms of the accounting ERP software or in some other instance where all that data is not talking correctly. So it starts in the very beginning, job number creation. And it's amazing all the different gray work where someone has to go, okay, well, who's the PM? Let me go to this job site folder, or let me bring up the resumes for the job of what we're planning on doing. Let me go talk to somebody and have more meetings. Or, hey, there was that email that I know that every time we start a job, the project executive is sending out an email about who the PM is. That should all be standardized and within a process from the very beginning, and having your templates and having that automatically go into the systems for it. So That's one example, and Jeff and I can go on. Another example comes to mind is purchase orders and supply chain. I mean, as we create these point solutions that again do very well at it, chances are there's a spreadsheet behind the scenes, such as tracking, well, I need to request a brand new PO, let alone order what to a current vendor or manufacturer just directly from it. So just to come up with the PO number and the limits, what are all the processes in Excel spreadsheets or emails that you're sending to your supply chain or your purchasing division just to simply come up with that number that, again, someone has to manually type into your point solution for ordering material for it. So those are two that come to mind, but if we had 15, 30 years, we can actually talk about all those gray works scenarios. Jeff, is anything come to mind on your side?
Well, I could, yeah, obviously we could sit here and talk about them. We both got them in our history. One of the things though, I'm a respect for perspective type person. And I like to give some of these field folks credit, like our foremen, our superintendents, they're, headed out onto job sites, new jobs consistently. And so they're being, presented with new tools, new technology. But again, we're holding them to their schedule. We're holding them to getting materials ordered. We're holding them to getting everybody home safe every day with, 10 fingers and 10 toes. So, to understand that they have to relearn tools every time they get on a job site, what are they going to do? They're going to come up against friction and they're going to remove the friction any way they can. And that might be a spreadsheet. Bob, I'm going to say you've been in a lot of trailers, man. It's going to be a set of sticky notes. There's reasons some of the point solutions look like a whiteboard with sticky notes all over it, because it's got to be frictionless. We've got to keep them moving. We've got to have a perspective for them. And, again, each one is different. There's a general superintendent for your concrete. There's a general superintendent for your electrical and your mechanical, and, a general superintendent for the job site as well. So they all work and have different needs. And so great work's going to happen because they've got to, come together and push a project forward. So there's a lot of reasons for it. And that's what I like to bring to light, is why but wherever there's a problem, there's an opportunity, right? You're into lean, Bob, and every problem we come across is an opportunity for us to continue to improve. It's an opportunity for us to team better. But a lot of it, you said it starts with, from the earliest bid to our closeout, you got to begin with the end in mind. What do you need at the end of this project? In a lot of our areas, that we build, we have 10-year cycles, that we're on the hook for warranty claims, et cetera. So in 10 years, are you going to have all those sticky notes from the wall? Are you going to have all that information? How much time are you going to spend recreating the wheel to try and figure out if that's your problem as the GC or if it's the designer's problem? Again, we can't, we have to have this data in a place that helps us move through that process. And it's going to keep getting created unless, first and foremost, we admit we have a problem and we start to look for unified solutions that can really help us.
Jeff, I appreciate that approach and that perspective, to have compassion. These are people who are just trying to get the work done, and inevitably, there's going to be that friction that's going to result in the gray work. And that's a bummer. That nobody wants to spend their time focused on gray work when they've got other things that they want to do. But it completely makes sense. I think the challenge, though, and that things that people are feeling, across the board, is that the gray work does still happen despite the best intentions and despite no one wanting to point any fingers or anything like that. And there is an impact of the gray work. The gray work does impact the company. And I know that you talk to a lot of people about challenges that they have and what it's kind of causing them to feel. What are their aches and pains? So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the impact of gray work.
Well, the impact of gray work is I'm really excited to bring this to the surface, because not enough people talk about this. And so I'm going to get out there because I am an independent consultant. So I get to say a few of these things. Contractually, we are actually agreeing to hire people to do duplicate data entry because, we're in a situation now, like I said, where, an owner has a system and on these big joint venture projects, they're requiring everybody put their data in there. Well, your joint venture GCs, they are agreeing to do that, but they've got to have their own data set at the end, right? The final, unfortunately, the final part of construction is litigation, right? It's where we fight it out. And so we all must maintain our own data in order to have a story that can tell us where we are in that process. And so we have a labor problem and a labor shortage in our industry. So great, we go to the greatest construction management schools in the country and we say, come to our incredible company, come to our incredible jobs. We're building the healthcare facilities of the future, the sky, the high rises. And you're going to sit in this trailer if you're lucky to be close enough to the job, and you're going to take information from this system and you're going to hand key it into this system 1,000 times. And we wonder why they won't take, hey, construction's a great opportunity. It's not in that case, right? But also, if you really break that down to what it is, that's 1,000 chances for an error. Humans are really bad at data entry. We are flawed in that process, and computers are fantastic at it. It's repetitive, it's mathematical. It is not nearly as error prone as we are. So the opportunities there are to create a better environment for people. And some of the impacts are we're losing time with our heads up. You'll hear this in business all the time. You're working in the business and not on the business. That's what we're doing to these incredibly seasoned, smart builders. We're pushing them to type into keyboards or to collect data and information multiple times when they could have their heads up and be looking for signs of things. If you have a connected system that tells you progress, that tells you who's supposed to be on the job site today, what work area we're supposed to be in, then that gives you 30 minutes, 40 minutes back in your day of looking for information and going, okay, are they here? Are the materials staged for them? Are the things ready for them to work? Are we ready to get rolling? That's a much more powerful process for those people. That's a much better process for them to keep a job moving forward instead of looking down at a keyboard and wondering, hey, are we on schedule or not?
Jeff, Megan, I'm sorry, just to chime in on that. I mean, I think you're hitting something here that's extremely important, right? Is the job trailers are remote and everyone who's doing a phenomenal job keeping the job going at the end of the day and keeping it safe, moving it forward and putting out the gray work on the sticky note that's on that whiteboard. And we're missing, and the impact of that gray work is missing the KPI or that data point that really should be in a system that's going to speak to the schedule that you were just referring to. And it's out there, and the impacts go further beyond. You're talking about lack of standardization. You're talking about every time a company comes, we talk about operational excellence. I want to standardize. What is the SOP for this particular process each and every time? But if the system doesn't allow it, or if we have multiple systems and you're literally just hiring someone to go re-input, that's the SOP. Okay, every time we have a job, we're going to go rehire a new person just to go do that. That's going to impact cost, profitability at the end of the day. And we got to be wiser. We got to think differently about how is that information funneling to the next one overall and begin to create better standard operating procedures that we can all agree to as a company.
So Bob, you're talking about kind of this almost like a tipping point, like we got to do it better. We can't keep having the interns entering 1,000 lines of data. There's too many errors. It doesn't, drive people to fall in love with the industry the way other people do. I think that, we're just hearing that a change needs to happen. But Jeff, I'm kind of curious, what are some of the solutions that people have been seeking? What are they really doing to help solve the problems right now?
Well, we got to go back to data. We got to go back to the raw materials. We've got to collect all of the data. So many of our systems only need parts of it. Bob talked earlier about, needing, scan data or needing other, if you're talking about, I need my RFIs, I need my change orders, I need my daily logs, I need to know my progress. But if you even go earlier into the process, into the design phases, as we're starting to call out, and starting to specify things, if we can keep the fidelity of that data and understand and glean from it later, we're going to have an opportunity to do more with it. Do I need to know and have a picture and all of my scans go into my ERP system? No. Do I need it to be a really good percent complete so I can chase that money to get paid for the work I've done? Yes, I do. But if I have that spec data and I can, use it and cross-reference it for, hey, every time I see these things spec'd or this RFI, it leads to a change order. It leads to a delay. It can take me and focus me on the problem, right? Bob, you come from electrical. We know switch boxes, switch gear can be 52 weeks out. So if I have an RFI come in from my electrical around the switch data, then I know it needs to be top priority in the next OAC meeting so we can get it signed off and agreed upon, or else we're going to have a building with no switch gear and we're not going to be able to hand it over. And you know this more than ever. Our buildings, substantial completion is not your certificate of occupancy anymore, right? Your systems must be up and running. Your IT, your IoT, your access controls, all of that need to be up and running for substantial completion. Well, and substantial completion leads to what? Getting paid. And let's be honest, not everybody's real comfortable with this, but all of us are in this business to make money, our fair share of that money. And unfortunately, we spend time picking up pennies and stepping over dollars because we're not connecting our systems. We're not utilizing our data. So that's sort of my perspective on it. And, I think it can just get better and better.
Yeah, I like that. And this concept you said, the fidelity of data, that makes a lot of sense. I like that. That's fun. Let's get that trending, everybody, on LinkedIn. So, okay, I want to pivot really quick. Bob, you've been a long time customer for us. You've been a great Quickbase champion. Now we've got you on board. We've stolen you. But I'd love to hear, since you've got so much experience with Quickbase, like how did you take some of these concepts that we've been discussing today, and how did you get them to kind of apply to your own situation, or what's your story with Quickbase?
Yeah. I think in terms of some of the instances, I think everyone out there has their own project listing of how to do project improvement in their own four walls. And it varies from company to company in terms of what the priority is. And what's interesting is kind of some of the trends and themes that's impacting the business a lot anymore really revolves around resource or asset management and what's moving forward with it. So quite often working with leadership to say, okay, here's the priorities that we need to figure out. We need to begin process mapping current state, future state. And a lot of times that revolved around this new trend around prefabrication and how does this impact pre-construction and move forward with it. And so before we just jump in and implement a solution and try it out, let's understand that entire process from beginning to end. Let's understand how we've been talking about, as Jesse alluding to, from estimating and looking at all this information. Maybe we have all the material and gear. What are the high priority items that's going to impact supply chain? And let's have a lean Kaizen event or project event that includes all of the different departments and process map it and figure out what each stakeholder needs along the way. And so we're figuring out what are the key instances, the key data points, what is going to be impactful, and we're tying that together to a process map to understand, okay, when we have this project, we know that we're going to be doing overhead racking or underground, and we're going to prefab these units. That's a whole nother department that comes in that needs to be communicated to in a very efficient way. So taking that and creating the dashboards by role, figuring out notifications, figuring out how does this piece of widget go from point A to point B, as opposed to just saying and calling someone, hey, this prefabricated unit's done, where does it need to go? Everybody needs to be communicated to along the way. And so that's been exciting. And I think I'm harping on prefabrication and kit tracking and planning and design, but that's where we're seeing a lot more information, I think, with data and how to communicate that through. And I think one thing just to harp on a little bit more is the date changes. We're trying to implement prefab and say, okay, we're done. Just go prefab and think it's easy. When in fact, how do you communicate a date change? how is that documented? And that date change might actually impact project management for a change order, because now there's going to be a delay because we can't prefab something. And then Jeff hit the nail on the head. We don't have the gear here ready at the same time. So we're prefabbing before that comes in. There's a lot of different instances that we got to communicate to keep the schedule together. And if we don't take the time to figure out the process first and then begin to code that into the data to understand where that all moves forward, has been the approach. And so using Quickbase, building it out as Legos and taking it bit by bit of saying, okay, here's a proof of concept. Does this make sense? Is this going to solve your problem? And then if not, how do we begin to evolutionize this and move this to the next layer on it? So, and it's never done. And it's beautiful that it continues to grow, because we're all smart at the end of the day. We all have ideas to improve the whole project. It's a matter of getting all of those thoughts out on a piece of paper or in a meeting. How many times do we come to a meeting and everyone's just nodding their heads and not solving a problem at the end of the day? Facilitating these meetings, thinking about how is the system and the data, what are the data points I need for those dashboards and KPIs, and let's build it to suit. Let's not create this massive spreadsheet that's we're going to get analysis paralysis just simply looking at it and having 15 interns do it. Let's walk through that process from beginning to end. So sorry for a tangent on that one, but that's exciting. I mean, we got to figure out how to tackle these problems efficiently in the industry.
I understand. I think that all makes great sense. Glad that everything worked out and has been so successful for you. I think there's one last concept that I want to touch on. We've only got about a minute or so left, but it's this idea of kind of bringing all of our data together will help with kind of predictability. And so I'd love to hear if you've got some thoughts, maybe just one example where kind of that connective data improves predictability and can help save money and save time on construction projects. Jeff?
I'm going to steal Bob's there.
All right.
We have the greatest problem solvers on the planet in our field, right? And on our project teams, multiple project teams across all of the different stakeholders. If they know about a problem ahead of it, it's information. It's not bad news, right? We can come up with alternative specs. We can come up with and do work in other areas. We can plan ahead and we can react, but we need time. We're always trying to do it at the last minute. So this opportunity in a prefabricated scenario where something's not ready or not going to be ready when it's supposed to, if I know I've got other floors, if I know I've got other trades, other things I can do, I can shift my schedule, keep moving forward, and predictably tell my owners when I'm going to deliver. That's the key to me. It's predictability. It's trust. If I'm open to say there is a problem, let's get together and solve it. And here's the data. I can create trust. And there's nothing that can make a job go faster than a team that trusts one another with their problems and creates opportunities. So I stole yours, Bob, I'm sure, but that was mine.
I think there's two. I mean, percent completes come to mind. I mean, you hit the nail on the head too, like that of, okay, if we have all this data, if we know peak manpower, if we know the curves of how this project's going, and we know the dates and what's available to us, we're going to be able to predict that and be able to kind of come closer to what is that new state for the project manager to plan, to get the proper resourcing allocated, et cetera. But I think one of the things, Megan, that really for predictability for me goes back to estimating. We're getting all of this information from industry to industry. We're doing data centers, we're doing hospitals, we're figuring out, we're doing this takeoffs that have, okay, we've got 5 floors. This is what the square foot and the dollar per square foot is going to be for each one of these. You now have data that, quite frankly, AI and artificial intelligence can begin to tell you, okay, these are the jobs that we probably should be looking after that are most profitable, that is going to end hopefully on time and on budget, as we always wanted to. But all these different factors on it. So I think we're going to see a big push from the estimating standpoint and figuring out how to help out the contractors bid the right work for the right profitability.
I love hearing that. I think the overall message is, if I could summarize, is connect your data, get control of your processes, trust your people, have a great team, and you're going to find some success. So I love hearing all that. Thank you both so much, Bob and Jeff. Really appreciate. Had a lot of fun on this discussion. This was Unlocking Connectivity by Breaking Down the Walls of Inefficiency. We're now going to have our live Q&A, so go ahead and keep dropping those questions in the chat, and we will be sure to answer them. And enjoy the rest of Empower 2024. Thanks so much.